Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Henry Faber, founder and community manager of Gamma Space, a non-profit co-working space for those working in and with video games. Hi, Henry. How are you doing today?
Not bad. Thanks, Link. Thanks for having me on. It's my pleasure to be here.
No, and thank you so much for joining me. Very happy to have you here. So, the pleasure is all mine. Now,
I noticed. Oh, I was gonna say. I noticed how you started. You mentioned that we have a co-working space, and that's where I'm from. But I might dive right in, unless you want to start asking the questions. Sorry.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. You kind of beat me to it. I was actually about to ask you to maybe introduce yourself or tell everyone a little bit about yourself and about Gamma Space for for those that might not be aware.
Yeah, no, it's. I'm really excited to do this, and I guess you can tell by me wanting to jump in that I'm always eager to talk about what I do at Gamma Space, and more importantly, with the community that I'm engaged with. But Gamma Space did indeed start as a co-working space 10 years ago for independent game developers, and during that time, it was really well connected and really getting a sense of just how diverse and remarkably talented the independent game development scene in Toronto was. The co-working space itself was actually not set up for game makers initially. My wife and I had moved back from Vancouver to Toronto. I was born here and I lived here for many years. But when we came back, we were doing web application development work and a lot of digital project management and that sort of thing. And we decided we didn't want to work out of our home anymore, so we would start a co-working space and bring like-minded people in. And when we did that, we basically set out feelers to different types of events and tech things and startups and activities that were going along. And one of them was the Global Game Jam. And we just decided to check it out. And the response was so sort of like positive and overwhelming to having a potential space where indie game makers could come in and work on stuff that our core membership started out there. It was also at that time my partner co-founded Dames Making Games out of the space, and that just set this tone of not just incredible artistic and technical talent, but also a remarkable culture of inclusivity and diversity that sort of like has permeated into every aspect of my life ever since, and has got me to really, reevaluate how I do things, to be as supportive as possible to those who've been marginalized from tech spaces, and really push to give everything I have to give opportunities to people who just wouldn't normally have it. Oh yeah, so go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't mean to cut you off there. So please continue if there was
Well, yeah, I guess what I was gonna sort of go into, of course, like even though we had this space and we did that and we did hundreds of events and hosted Bit Bazaar, which was like a indie game making maker / arcade / craft fair, indie comics kind of thing. And we did just so many different partnerships with different companies and studios and just tons of events. The pandemic put an end to that, not only from the perspective of killing a lot of in-person events, but also killing the space that Gamma Space actually became part of. I also became the president of the Toronto Media Arts Centre, which was a 40,000 square foot facility in Toronto's Queen West. And it was a home to media arts, basically, of like all types. And so even video games would rub shoulder to shoulder with filmmakers and projection artists and people who make installations and that sort of thing. And so it was an amazing cross-pollination of ideas. But to do that, we had to hold the city of Toronto accountable for fulfilling their deal of actually giving TMAC the space as we had an agreement with them back in 2012. And it's basically just became a massive, the city just did not want to be accountable for this specialized space. They basically changed their mind. They used it to ensure that the developers got, their density bonus to increase the number of floors in the building for condos and to sell that. Then then the developer went bankrupt. And then it became a target to the bankruptcy trustees to like take the whole thing while we were still in it. It was a nightmare, right? Like just an absolute nightmare. But we couldn't fight to hold on to it and raise money for it while the pandemic was going on, and so we kind of lost our opportunities. So now we're not a physical space, we're a tight knit online community. And when I say tight knit, and when I talk about membership, it's not that we're like so exclusive that nobody can come in, but it is one that is focused on people that are artists and professionals in game development. And while we do talk about games and play games and that sort of thing, we're not, a space for gamers, and that's like a big distinction. But something really amazing happened last year, over the last 10 months, basically, and that is we saw all the hardships that were happening to people under COVID. We saw people losing jobs and like experiencing homelessness and unsafe living conditions. We saw all sorts of horrible stuff. And we also saw tons of toxicity really coming to the fore. It was always known, whispered in the industry, but it was really coming to the fore in large AAA studios and not so large AAA studios. And everyone wanted something different. And so that's when we started developing collectively. And this hasn't been publicly announced, so you're getting a little bit about this ahead of time, into a node-based co-op. And what that basically means is that we have three sort of nodes that the community can interact with. There's a community node that's like for enthusiasts. There's a professional node for people who are running their own studios or practicing artists. And then there's the Hyades node, which is the management of the node, and they manage the entire thing, but also manage digital projects. And we've been developing this, dozens of Gamma Space members over the last 10 months. And it's really exciting because we've been able to help each other out, find work for each other, support each other in some really meaningful ways, and develop what we call like a value that helps people understand the impact of their contributions to the community. Invisible work that community organizers do that is often not really credited or like seen as important gets tracked as well. And also livelihood work comes in here, and the ability to barter with people through, out of love and care for people that want to share and exchange services with each other. So we've been pioneering this entire system to do this, and we've taken on several projects over the summer. We're working internally on many projects, and we've got a whole lot more coming up this year, including announcing this formally. So what this basically means is that we take all the values of like inclusivity and safety and care and apply them not just on a per person per project level, but as a sort of a real community driven like set of values, right? And something that is really expressed in a way that allows people to feel comfortable to explore their things and have that kind of support when things are kind of uncertain right now.
So I apologize. This is totally on me. It's everything you said that sounds absolutely wonderful. Well, high level sounds absolutely wonderful. Losing the space and that obviously
Mm-hmm.
is not wonderful. So my sympathies for getting yanked around by that one. It's never
Thank you.
fun to effectively lose your home like that. If I may refer to it as your home, and I
Oh,
imagine,
it was. We spent a lot of time there. It's a lot
yeah,
of time.
exactly. And I based on everything you had said, that doesn't shock me. I don't think that should shock anyone really, because you sound very passionate about what you were trying to do or what you were doing, not trying to do, what you were successfully doing. And I imagine many of the members found it, considered it a home as well, because you know, um, despite all of the other nonsense that is going on in the industry right now. inclusivity has always been something that's important for gaming, or should be something that's important. There's no reason to play the game of, gates closed, or what have you, and gatekeep anything related about in gaming and the art space. Um,
Mhm.
it's in general. So I can imagine it was a very uh, hard thing to go through, or have to go through, for a myriad of reasons. But it sounds like you guys have a path forward, and it sounds like you're making best with what you have, what you can still do. And it sounds absolutely fantastic that um, it sounds like you're having success, and you're still able to work forward, only because I know that there are, maybe not the exact same, but there are other you know other nonprofits or other groups or what have you, that in the face of this, they might have folded. And I'm not saying that in a way to talk down or against
No, no, it's
what
the
have you.
fact. I mean, it's important to note, like, especially like we're lucky in Ontario, specifically in Canada, there are options for like if you want to make video games as part of your artistic practice as a professional, there are grants and things available. And on the professional side, there's tax credits and like things like bodies like Ontario Creates that can provide matching funding and all sorts of stuff that can make this stuff a lot easier to deal with. But at the end of the day, um, if you're looking at it from an arts perspective and arts orgs and things, they're fighting for scraps. We're fighting for scraps with each other, competing with each other, which is really unfortunate. All trying to figure out how to get the same envelopes of funding, sort of thing. So whenever you can go beyond that and think of different ways to create that sustainability, whether it is through the security and safety of the community members themselves or projects that they do, like it really makes a huge difference, and can really help move things along. And a lot of orgs who've been kind of struggling before the pandemic, they don't necessarily like they didn't fare much better. And honestly, we're on a shoestring. We have few expenses, because we don't have a space to maintain. We don't have any staff. Even when we were running, everything was all volunteer. Um, so I didn't take a paycheck from Gamma Space. That's not to say, by the way, that not-for-profits can't make money. We can generate money, and the idea is that the value of the not-for-profit doesn't increase, and what we do is put it all back into the community. So if we do make money, it goes to paying for workshops or paying for converting some of that work that people did to support the community and that we're tracking. We can give them like a little dividend, in cash, like at the end of the year or something like that, or sooner. The idea is to have enough money flowing in here that we can pay people all the time just for their efforts of maintaining, uh, you know, a strong community with strong goals and strong projects.
And that all makes a lot of sense. And I agree that it is a very difficult place to have to. So I'm trying to choose my words properly here, just because they need to be. But it's a very difficult place to, as you said, fighting for scraps, and have to look at potentially another community or another organization that you fully support and believe in and stand behind the same thing that they're trying to do, but have to look at them and say, yeah, but I'm gonna take it for ourselves. And I don't mean that you do that in like a negative way or
No,
anything.
no,
It's just
it's the fact though, and unfortunately, like stuff stuff happens all the time, that is regrettable in that side of things. And why we've been quiet about what we're doing isn't to be sort of insular and or like keep people in the dark from it. It's more like we knew that the members who've been here first, who've been around, needed to help make the thing that they wanted to be in, right? And then once we do that and we open the doors, we know we're pretty sure there's gonna be a lot of just like there is in all the things we do, because the people behind the work we do, all the community members are, really passionate and really care, and that attracts a lot of people, you but at the end of the day, though, yeah, it can be rethinking the scarcity mindset, rethinking who has to be the first or the best, rethinking who's doing something, that no one else is doing, and how can we be open and sharing. All of our processes that we're developing, for example, they will be freely available to anyone once we release them, right? Our value flow accounting system, there is some technology being made around that as well. All of these things will eventually be free to anyone. In a perfect world, maybe there's a way to create nodes within our structure that supports them. In a still ideal world, they create their own structures and we cooperate together and share things, and create resource sharing networks, which was the entire point of like the TMAC, the Toronto Media Arts Center, and really everything I do. I find it impossible to work in traditional sort of capitalist work stuff. I've tried. I took my first job since 1999 at the beginning of last year for a few months, and it literally lasted a few months. I couldn't do it because I don't believe in exploiting people or communities to get their data, to increase the profit or repay some investors for a corporate project. I can't do it. I find it upsetting, and I find it like any exploitive or extractive process right now, especially during the pandemic, feels like very wrong. It's wrong, period, but it feels like especially, to me. And so really had to rethink that. But, I didn't know what to do. I personally make money by working with the people that I met within the community, and I end up becoming a digital project manager or producer. We produced some of the first Nintendo Switch games that made it onto the platform when it launched. PlayStation, Oculus, sorry, Meta, yeah, MetaQuest, HTC stuff, Xbox. Our community. I've been involved with so many games from our community. Some that I just touched a little bit, others that I've pushed over the finish line or found funding for. I believe really strongly in supporting projects and supporting creators that are creating, equitable working situations for themselves and for others.
So, I said it earlier, and what you're doing, I think is fantastic, and I think it's great, and it's a great way to move forward and such. Um, there isn't really much to add to that. It's fantastic to hear that you're. I'm trying to think of the right words again. That you are trying to morally and ethically support good companies or good
Yeah,
projects.
good projects and practices,
Thank you. That's the word.
and really like amplify those values.
Yeah, exactly. So, with that in mind, and since we're kind of on the topic of it, and some of this might have already been covered or touched on, but as working with Gamma Space and as someone for the Toronto Media Arts Center and all of that, I imagine that you have a very different or unique view into the community development of the Toronto gaming scene and such. What's that looking like now with the pandemic? Like, is it still doing good, or is it how's it going? Is really the I think the easiest way to
Yeah,
put it.
I mean, the thing about the Toronto sort of quote unquote scene is that it's vast and it's also heavily fractured, and a lot of like orgs and people over the last decade have tried to unite it and like speak for it and all that kind of stuff, and it's something I don't really in because the diversity is its strength, and it allows all sorts of wild things to happen, right? And if people can find community pockets that support each other, I think that's fantastic. And seriously, I'd say back up until about 2018, um, I mean, I would say that Gamma Space had game members putting out games that always appeared in the IGF. There was always at least honorable mention, for a game. Memorable ones include like Christine Love with Lady Killer in a Bind, got best writing at the IGFs a couple of years ago, right? A few years ago now. And, that was just like a hugely, it's just exciting to give you the kind of like caliber and interest of people that are doing work in the community. And so you would see this when you're running events coming in, or Bit Bazaar, you would see all these things from all over the province and the city, and people coming in and sharing work, and it just sparks so much lively stuff. But I will say that without spaces and events, it has taken a toll. Now everything's online, and I love the accessibility of that, especially like when people put accessibility kind of features into those things. If you like, sign language and interpretation, or like, having subtitles for videos or text transcripts available, all that kind of stuff, right? Is fantastic. If you're like a parent or someone in a different time zone where you can't maybe like make the same hourly commitment or whatever, but like it's available on demand, all this stuff is wonderful, but we're also seeing that everyone is seeing each other's all the time from everywhere, constantly, right? So what I think is that Toronto all of a sudden has more competition than it ever had, in some ways. And I don't mean that in like a competition best quality, but just like the standard and quality of work in games across the board right now is redonkulous. It is unbelievable what is being produced, or coming to light, or things like that. And there's no magic one place, I think, that, you used to be able to point on the map to certain places that were doing like the best work, or the most consistently innovative, interesting, let's talk about it, work. And I don't think that's as simple to do anymore, for better or worse. I mean, I think people who play games and people who appreciate the artistry of creating games are lucky right now, right? Like they're embarrassed for choices, right? Like it's not just the backlog that you have. It's just like there's just everything else coming constantly, right? And such interesting stuff. There's something we were going to talk about. We had talked earlier about what is my favorite trend over the last few years, of games, and the opportunities for underrepresented creators to tell stories and simply just make something they want to make and have it be potentially not just seen by people, but even successful, is incredible to me. I had an opportunity back in, was it 2018 or 17? I went to Iran. I went to the Tehran video game conference. I was invited to that, and they flew me in, and it was wild, the hoops I had to do to get the papers to come into to the country and stuff like that. And that scene that was doing stuff, that scene that was like making games there, was so different from anything I experienced in North America or Asia. It was wild what I saw and who I talked to and how I had the opportunity to meet during that time. And in some ways, there are the ability to create and program and make the art was like far exceeded anything I had seen in local community stuff here in Toronto. But the sophistication of the games themselves were driven by totally different factors that made them not always fun or even interesting. But the passion and the perspective in there, like, was so exciting, right? And now I'm seeing some of those people, unfortunately, because of the state of the U.S. politics and stuff, it is very hard to communicate regularly with people in Iran, even in Canada, like in a realistic way, in a safe way. But the people that I do felt like now, that experience opened them up to opportunities around the world, and now they're doing stuff that takes what they know and that we think we know, and putting those together, and you're seeing some really cool stuff, really cool work. And I think that like this sort of openness and the fact that you can access anyone. And I say that with a real grain of salt, right? Like, it's still difficult to be heard in a noisy room, right, with like thousands, millions of people in it, right? So I totally get that, but the possibility is there, and if, facilitating those kind of conversations and communication allows cool stuff like that to happen, and these opportunities and funds to come out, and publishers and sub communities, and places. I hope the gamma space that feels attractive to people to feel safe and create and get extra support and mentorship from people who've been around a little bit like myself, or totally new people that are like them, in terms of levels of experience. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I guess the short answer is that I think Toronto has a lot to be proud about, and is home to many cool things and many great people. But I think the vibe that made Toronto like super special is very different now.
So thank you for that. Thank you for that. I in terms of as you said, you don't know if you answered the question. I think you answered it and touched on so many other things, which is absolutely fantastic. It's always great to hear uh, a view from a view to a scene that I personally wouldn't be aware of or really following, just by sheer not having the exposure to it. Um, but at the same time, it's great to hear that that your view on the trend is unique, and I think is a very valid approach, view on it. Um, just because it's because you're right, like just the as you said, like the vibe that was there evolves, and the more voices in in the noisy room or what have you. But I think being exposed to different things, and like not in a form of competition, I want to be clear on that, not
Mm.
that you have to feel that you're competing with anyone, but hearing someone else's voice, hearing what they're doing and inspiring them and such, that I don't think is a negative thing at all, because
Mm.
we get you get diversity, and the more diverse something becomes, or sorry, let me rephrase that. The more exposure you have to that diversity, the more it becomes, in a way, normalized to you, and gives you a new way to think or a new way to understand. Um, you know, uh, I forget his name right now. He's a rather famous chef. Like the Momofuku Milk Bar. David
Oh, Chang.
Kang, I think.
Yeah.
Um, he has a quote that I absolutely love, and I think it's easily to very easy to steal this quote and transfer it. But he was basically, when he was like trying to interview and talk with a bunch of people around the states, he was saying he feels that food is the major connector. Like it's something that you can share in, and you can take from and modify, and you'll learn more about someone, and all of that. And I kind of see video games in a lot of ways, because everyone sort of approaches games, whether they're playing them, developing them, enjoying them, what have you, their own way. And being able to see, high level, just all of the little different communities kind of making their own version of it, and being able to be exposed to that, aside from cross pollinating in terms of, oh, that's a great idea, I want to play if it, experiment it with it. But you're also getting an eye into that person, where they're from. Kind of like you said, it's an entirely different scene, but with that exposure, other people might see stuff that they're doing and think, "Oh wow, this person, I want this person. You want to, I want to work with them. I
Yeah.
want to meet them, what have you, right?" And I think I absolutely love that that is your view, kind of on like your favorite trend, the accessibility and the cross pollination and such. If I understood correctly, and I, you know,
Yeah, well, those opportunities, and I mean like from a both like platform and like sort of appetite and interest, but I also mean literally for like black and people of color, indigenous folks to have a chance to like potentially more than they could. It's still a huge. Me saying this, by the way, is the caveat is that it's far from perfect yet. But it is much more. There are, much more in likely to hit like core audience kind of gamers, at an award show or something like that. You're going to see stuff like that more because it is being championed by the industry or by individuals. I mean, again, not as much as it should be, but I don't want to like rose colored glasses this, but like I can see the trend is upward. And I guess when I also like feel excited about it because I see that the community that I'm part of does, they push for that. And so to me, it's a wonderful thing.
Exactly, and like I mentioned earlier, and I'll kind of reharp that or hit that drum, but I think having inclusivity in the industry or in the sphere or what have you is a fantastic thing because you give a voice to people that otherwise felt they had no voice, or you give someone that feel they were underrepresented a chance to actually enjoy something that might represent them better.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use, for example, Red Dead Redemption 2. That's not a perfect example. It's just one that I can easily go to. I know someone that they are Aboriginal, and they, in playing the parts of Red Dead where you were doing respectful, I guess is the easiest way to put it, honorable things, I guess you'd say, with the, I don't know the right word for in the States. I'm just going to go with native. Um, but with the Native Americans, that spoke to them in a very different way because there isn't a lot of representation in video games for Aboriginal or Native American or what have you, and being able to experience that in a way that's not um, disrespectful is like you kind of like you said, upward trend. All things
Mm-hmm.
considered for a Western game or what have you, or Wild West kind of game. Sorry, is what I meant there.
Yeah.
I had that in air quotes, but
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't see those air
yeah,
quotes.
exactly. Why I mentioned it. Um, but like it's just inclusivity because it lets. I firmly believe it is where I'm trying to go, and giving people the
Yeah.
ability to see things that will mean something more to them than it might mean to someone else, and that's not a bad thing. Some people think it is. Whatever, to those people don't care. But
Yeah.
what I'm meaning is, it's fantastic that that is a trend, and spaces allow that, and you get to see and experience that, and other people get to feel safer by having something that relates and feels home to them. You know.
Yeah, and I think the trick is to push that even further, right? And that is like who's making the games, who has the opportunities. It shouldn't just because a large company with like infinite resources, feels like they've been pushed into some uh, diversity and inclusion mandate, just to like include something, and do that. I'm talking about ensuring that like teams are like equitable, like have members, and not only just in any game, and that they're given those opportunities, as well, and that they're given the ability to, make lead studios and develop projects like as they see fit. Um, this stuff is equally sort of important in there, which is why I really look to the indies and all the work they're doing. But, you know, in all fairness, they're doing the hard work so that the AAA people, often just sort of cherry pick the ideas that they want and that they feel comfortable with, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's like it's always the people that are underrepresented and who have been marginalized that do all this work, right? It's not like because Rockstar like is so brilliant and suddenly like their whole leadership and investors like had like this realization that they should game like uh indigenous and American Indians, folks in the game that maybe they actual, you know, indigenous actors. or voice actors, or maybe get a to actually knows these things. I mean, that stuff is kind of like the bare minimum, in my perspective, right? If you're gonna like do something like that, and unfortunately, the rest of it isn't always addressed. And like, not that I'm trying to be a downer or anything, but like, I'm saying like it's important to recognize that it's just about like, hey, we're learning something new about another culture, isn't that? And then you forget about it, but like integrate it into the experience of actually the game, or acknowledging that the people this like white dudes. Link, I don't know anything about like your background like that, but I'm a cis white head. I'm the top of the food chain, and I'm now 44 years old. And guess what? I have a lot of sway in everything I do, even though I've chosen paths that are harder for me and like don't make me rich and all that kind of thing. I had the privilege to choose that. Do you know what I mean? Like I decided to do that. I'm not just like had to like carve things out in such a weird way. I just looked at the situation and wanted to do better for myself and other people, you know? And it's important to think about that when we like applaud like the efforts of the larger companies and what they're actually doing. I really get like annoyed when everything for years, like literally until the pandemic, everything was like an initiative. Let's have like women in games initiative. Let's have a Black creators initiative. All this, we're well past initiatives. There's grassroots community groups doing hard work to do that stuff. Don't do an initiative. Give them the money to do the work. Partner with them meaningfully. Have them, integrate them in a way that actually makes the structural changes. But like, it's easy enough to say that, and you're probably wondering, like, why do I care about this so much when we're here to talking about video games? But to me, this is like absolutely fundamental. Like, people look at the 90s with like like for the types of what first person shooters came out, this and this, but like people also forget that there was an incredible mediocrity and like sameness to so many genres, because it was all being marketed to this concept of like a white kid that was like 18, and drinks, extreme juice, or whatever. And we're dudes, and they wanted to see the Duke Nukem characters and bikini babes and machine guns and all this stuff. And it's like, I think about the very first time I saw game marketing, like for the Atari and stuff, when I was like a very young kid. They showed like a bunch of different kids always in those videos. I don't know if you've seen that old Atari stuff, but it's like in ColecoVision. It was always like, boys and girls and, black kids and white kids. And like, they were there because they said this was the game. This was for everyone, and even the low fidelity graphics that were there at those old days allowed a lot more kind of transference of self, because there was so little information on the screen, right? Like, we had like tiny, like little pixel abstractions and spaceships and things like that, but like it didn't matter. You could put yourself into the game. And then what happened as graphics got better and as more it became big business, and like the sports franchises brought so much money to games that like it's actually shaped like what we expected to see, or sorry, what they thought we wanted, right? And it was always white dudes, macho, this, doing that. And talk about like alienating people that played games in the first place, and making it seem like it wasn't a place for them to even make games, because who not everybody wants to make characters that look like that. So it's good to like sort of think about that all in the context of, and how it's wild that we have games like Overwatch with like so much public discourse and discussion and like thought going into the character designs, or more, I guess maybe more appropriately, like something like Apex Legends or something like that. But again, that's the AAA big money commodified video game thing. I'm like really excited when I see like, indie games that are being announced left, right, and center. Made by teens of very diverse teens with like trans women, like driving like production studios, or you know uh, black folks basically making the like not just having their player expression co-opted onto TikTok, integrated into Fortnite by as dance moves that they don't get credited for, but like term, like what they want to, the stories they want to tell and how they want to be represented. And it may sound like to you when I'm talking about this broad way that I'm talking about everyone else but me, but at the end of the day, I can put in games that feature characters look just like me. I can sit here and tell you all day about all this other stuff, but it's nothing, a drop in the bucket, right? Compared to like literally every other game that. So it's like when people say they get tired of this, they think it's like a really specific like lens. Well, no, or yes, it is, but like look at how much everyone else has to swallow all the time.
Yes, like I I know I do this a lot, and I say this a lot in general, just across talking with a lot of people that I agree, I understand, I agree, and that's not in any way meant to be dismissive. It's more that it's an easy way for me to acknowledge everything that's been said
Yeah.
when I might not have when there might not need to be more that's been said, and I right now I very much agree with what you're saying, and I very much know where you're going. And there isn't really anything that I would say to in any way, shape, or form uh, argue anything or really
No, I don't get that
tack on
impression.
to it. Um, I agree completely. That is one of the wonderful things, and that's not exactly not exactly a thing that I personally look at and seek out. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm not meaning I'm against it. It's just, while I have said a lot of the same things that you have said in
Mm-hmm.
private conversation or otherwise, um, it's just a thing that I'm not as exposed to, which is fantastic to talk to someone that's a little more exposed to it and is maybe a little more has their hand on the vein or pulse check, whatever the phrase to
Yeah, yeah,
the is more into it, breathing it, whatever, what have you, living it.
yeah.
Um, so that's a fantastic the way you put everything. It's very fantastic. I don't disagree. I agree completely, and I think everything you said, it doesn't do harm. I said this earlier about something somewhat related, that there are other people that would argue that and say it does. Again, whatever to those
Mm-hmm.
people. I personally don't care, um, because I firmly believe the gates are open. Like there's I'm 33, soon to be 34 in like 2 days actually.
Mm.
Um,
Happy birthday.
oh, thank you. By the way, that was not what I was aiming for, but thank you. Just the realization that I'm getting old. Um, but I grew up in a time where playing video games wasn't something everyone did. In fact, I imagine you can share this in that you probably, the same as me, you probably got looked at weird when you wanted to just play video games. People either didn't
Oh
understand it.
yeah, like the funny thing is everything's in cycles, right? Like there are times now, or like when I was, yeah, like when I was in my like I'd say early 20s, like when I was like in art stuff, and I was like trying to play video games, they thought it was like you know they didn't a lot most of them were like we're not kids, Henry, and it's like, well, this isn't just for kids, check this out. And then next thing you know, everyone has Dreamcasts.
Yeah,
But but yeah, go on though. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, it's
no,
like
no
it's
worries. But like it's fantastic to see now that in a time when I'm being very careful with my words, just because I don't want to use the wrong words and offend anyone. But at a time right now where we have a lot of social things opening up, and I say that in the sense of more acceptance for, LGBTQ plus, or however you want to phrase it, um, for people that are transitioning or have transitioned, just in general, all of that in a time when society is starting to grow to accept that again. Sorry, I shouldn't say again. Is starting to be more accepting of that. We also have, you know, the gates, need are opening there and should stay open, obviously. But I'm not trying to co-opt this with what I'm about to say, but I'm happy that gaming right now is something that is seen as more acceptable because, like you said, giving people a voice, a diverse of voices and such, allowing people that are not, just cis white men or what cis white head or whatever the phrasing goes,
Mhm.
but having more people that are comfortable in who they are coming into the scene, whether it's just to enjoy games, but you
Yes.
also have those maybe developers, or creators or whatever, working on projects coming from a different place as them. Maybe it's someone that transitioned late in life and they're working on a video game and they're making a game that involves um, a transgendered person. I really hope I used that right. I'm not
Yeah,
on top with
transgender.
the language.
Yeah,
Thank you. Good.
transgender.
Very,
Yeah,
very
but
happy
yeah.
with that. But like you have someone that might make a character for that, and you have someone that wants to enjoy the game, or enjoy games, they might find themselves in that. And having that accessibility go as far as possible, like having the gates open as wide as possible, I think is absolutely fantastic. And I just hope that the cyclical nature of video games, the gates opening and closing and such, I
Yes.
hope they stay open longer,
Yeah.
or at the very least, we have people that are wanting to express themselves, expressing themselves in a safe enough way that it's not just a bunch of, like you said, the sameness of a game where you can plug a game in from the 90s and you can just play,
Hmm.
just dude that's another buff dude that's out there saving chicks, like
Yeah,
Duke
mowing stuff
Nukem
down,
or
right?
what have.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And like the thing is like that I think is worth like sort of like kind of like considering is that the pandemic also showed that video games hugely profitable to like the largest forces of capitalism. Like they outsell movies and every other entertainment by like such a large margin now that I think it's not going to go away. And I think that like what I really like is that we don't have to rely on those though if they haul themselves out and splinter or have cultures that like make all their employees flee them, or all that, so that we're not going to see games of that nature for a while. All that's cool because things like exist, itch.io. You have like many groups now that are championing this very stuff. I like to think that this will like keep pushing things, even if things collapse around us. But it's also like weird talking about this, while there's a pandemic going on, because like the constant other pressure of just the rest of the world that has nothing to do with media and video games, is distressing. And so like this is why I focus so much on people and why community development is so important. Because do you know what our community did at the beginning of the pandemic when we were still checking in with each other right away regularly and like doing all this stuff? We were organizing food programs with local businesses to ensure that people who were at risk, really at risk, and couldn't leave their house were getting food. We were ensuring that members that were in unsafe living conditions, because all of a sudden they were at home all the time with people that didn't make them feel very safe, got moved into other places. Like that stuff is like people stuff, and that's why we get video games, because people make them, you know and so I feel very strongly that community that protects itself and comes from a place of care actually you know does this and actually promotes good ideas and to become games by people who care.
Again, yes, I agree completely with everything that you've been saying, and I don't just to jump off of that, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm not interested in the conversation. I don't
No,
want
no,
to make
no.
it seem
We
like
talked about this. No, we talked about this stuff a lot, and I can, if you stop me, I go on and on. But I'm here to talk about video games. I know
no,
what they are, honestly.
no, it's perfectly fine. I'm not meaning to stop you. It's just you said a thing that that's I want to kind of ask like a follow up relatable to that one, and you talked about, the pandemic being stressful. Obviously, it is. All of this being an incredibly stressful situation. In all of that, is there is there a comfort game that you fall back on that, helps you forget that everything is, arguably falling down around us,
Yeah,
and it's, you're trying not to scream that the
yeah,
sky is falling. Sorry.
yeah. No, no, no. Totally. And I've got a weird thing I've learned about myself during the pandemic than I normally do. Because here's a secret that I'm sure you've heard from many guests, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The more involved you are with developing video games, uh, in my opinion, what I've seen anyway, is the less you play them. And it's not because you don't love them, but you're examining games, you're checking out on them. I buy and get given gifts of games, like codes from people, stuff all the time. And like, I check out as much as I can, but like at the end of the day, making games is very hard. Making, helping support communities that make multiple games and being involved with multiple games and people doing this stuff is also extremely challenging. So sometimes it's really hard to like sit down and like relax with a game. But what I've discovered is because my earliest game memories are of arcade with my dad in the 80s, like I still have a really sweet, pretty straight ahead action games, or like things that like require a high level performance with like fairly limited player expression. Um, so to that end, my most favorite comfort game is Ikaruga by Treasure. Um, by far my favorite. I think I can safely say it's my favorite game. So to the point where sometimes I have to stop playing it because it's like too much. It's like too much for me. Like I love it so much. And I might like, I don't know, I might just sail off one day and never come back. For those of you who haven't played Ikaruga, it's by Treasure. It's a shmup, and it's got a beautiful presentation, but it has a really cool mechanic. Your ship, um, basically, on top of shooting, has a polarity button, so you can like sort of switch between your ship being white and black. And when you're white, you shoot white bullets, which does more damage to black ships and makes you impervious to white, and vice versa with the black. And so what happens is it becomes this like dance of sailing in and out of fire by like switching your polarity, trying to kill the waves with the highest score possible as fast as possible by using the right ammo type and fighting giant bosses. If you do a little bit more research into you see that this game, which is filled with like all the giant boss approaching, all the staples of the genre, it's actually like basically based on Buddhism, and it's really interesting. I just want to double check something here to make sure I've got something right here. So, 1 second here.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and I just want to make sure that I'm right about this. Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's basically like an entire kind of, I'm just gonna check one thing. Sorry, I don't want to get my facts
No worries. I'll be honest. I'm not gonna fact check it either. I'll.
wrong.
So if you're wrong, if you're a little wrong on something, I'm not going to call you out on it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so it's like basically a reflection of Buddhist teachings that are introduced throughout each level. Each of the point in it is about that, and like it's super cool to me because like it's not really obvious. I mean, at least to me as a Western, maybe if I was a Japanese player or a Buddhist, I would notice this, but it's sort of just integrated into like it's like the sort of like overall presentation, and I find that absolutely fascinating. But it is a shmup, a bullet hell shmup, and you can play it on pretty much everything. I love playing it on PC or Switch because it has the tape mode, so you can rotate the screen vertically. So if you have a screen that's mounted, that you can rotate, um, or on the Switch, of course, you can just turn it sideways. You can play in this vertical mode, so it's like playing in the arcade. Just a awesome game, and I guess that I really feel good after something that intense, and then like I feel like kind of relaxed. So that would be probably my top comfort
So that's very interesting, and I don't mean this in a negative way when I say this, but I find it very interesting that your unwinding game, your best comfort game, or what have you, is a bullet hell.
game.
You know, I like shoot 'em ups. I
Yeah.
There are very certain bullet hells that I will play with and test out. Um, so to have the what's the right word? I'm gonna go with dexterity. Whatever.
Mm.
To have the dexterity to navigate that and also walk away relaxed is absolutely fantastic to hear. Um,
Well,
that you're able to do that.
I think the problem is that if I go all day and go slow paced, um, it tends to like put me to sleep, and I don't mean because I find boring games. Like I love narrative games. I love adventure, like traditional old school adventure games. I also find like a lot of contemporary play. I'm over the holidays. I've been playing Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on the PlayStation 5, and it's like so beautiful. It looks like a Pixar cartoon, but it's also like has so many buttons and so many combos and many things going on that even though like my game literacy is very high and I'm like I do think it's hilariously like overwrought, like in every possible way. And even though I'm enjoying the game, it just there's like yeah, I've got some weapons I can map to the D-pad button, and there's like a radial button where I can select all the other weapons that I have, and then they all have different modes based on if you squeeze half the trigger or the whole trigger. And it's like, it, let's see, not only can I jump and shoot in a twin stick fashion, but I can also turn on my jet boots and go fast, which is different from hovering when I jump over something, which is different again from my shadow dash move. Right? And you're kind of like, or phase or whatever it's called. It's like kind of like leap that you go off to the side fast, adapt of some sort. And I can do all of those things. Oh, and also hit things with my wrench, and then I can also aim and target something far away and throw my wrench. A different combination of buttons, and like the amount of player expression is but it's also like just incredibly. You couple that with like these ray trace graphics going around constantly, a shower of running around you, the set pieces integrated seamlessly with like it's ridiculous, and I find that actually not as relaxing, even though it's super intense. It's like I don't have the interface that is closest to me. The man machine interface, like I some older games like with shmups and things where it's like brain, eyes, reaction. Like that's what you got. And I guess my days are generally fairly intense, and so I kind of like ramp down with like a spike of intensity, and then it's like okay.
And that makes perfect sense. I understand what you're saying there. The kind of stress test yourself, I guess, and then walk away feeling relieved. And at the same time, I definitely understand the feeling of being overwhelmed by everything that's in front of you, have everything you have to juggle. whether or not it's everything you have to juggle in terms of buttons to push or just the options available to you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if you're not in the right mood for that, I fully understand that it can be mentally exhausting and not relaxing all of the time, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What about you? What do you do? Is there one that I need to know?
Well, comfort games, I don't exactly have a comfort game right now. It's very difficult for me to pick a game and stick to it. In terms of, one I'm going to go back to. Uh, if in terms of games that I can play and always enjoy and always find relaxing due to positive nostalgic memories and such. Mario Brothers 3, for example, is a
Mm.
fantastic game for me for that. However, just recently I actually um, beat Webbed. Um, Game made by S-Bug Studios, I believe, where you play as a spider, a little jumping spider that is trying to find or trying to rescue her spider husband or what have you. And it is the the best way I can put it. It is a wonderfully absurd game with very relaxing gameplay. There really isn't enemies that you have to kill. There's some puzzle platforming stuff like that, but
Hmm.
for the most um, the gameplay is you just shooting a web, flying, web swinging around. Um,
Wall crawler.
yeah, well, no, not even. You don't even get to wall
Nice.
crawl. You just get to web around, and like do little quests. And one of those quests, for example, is helping some ants create a giant mecha ant.
Hmm.
So they'll help you, and it's literally a giant mecha ant. Um, or collecting pollen so that way a local nearby beehive can have enough to send their queen off, or um, go talk to the dung beetles to get some fuel, which involves you bringing it down the mountain. Also, you can build a hot air balloon with everyone's help effectively to go higher than you'd be able to get otherwise to rescue your spider husband or spider boyfriend or what have you. All while being able to, little other things like finding some other spiders or collecting stickers, which turn your appearance different or let you wear
Hmm.
a hat, and shoot lasers out of your eyes and also sometimes skateboard.
What's one more
Um,
time? What's the name of it?
it's called Webbed.
Webbed. All right, I'm gonna look
Um,
into it.
I enjoyed it immensely. It's I don't want to it's a relatively short game. It's so you can beat it over one or two settings or seatings if you want.
Mhm.
But it's just absolutely fantastic
Oh
in
yeah, I have
how
seen. Yeah, this.
absurd some of it can be. Um, the end of the game, I was streaming it with some friends. They were watching me play it on Discord, and it was one of those things where, just saying it, some people did not understand it, didn't really like it, and then they start watching it and they realize how fantastic it is. And the sheer absurdity of the ending, which I'm not going to spoil because you have to experience it for yourself. Um, Everyone was at that point on board with the game, as they should, because not like it was a fantastically done little game. The intelligence and coding behind just making webs, for one thing, is absolutely mind blowing. That they worked that out because you can actually make a full proper web if you want, uh, and such. But just the enjoyability of it itself was just fantastic and relaxing. So yeah, so recently I played that and that was a fantastic comfort game just because of um, its focus not being on getting out there and, jumping on other bugs or zapping other bugs or what have you,
Yeah,
but largely just being a little puzzle platformer or just not even puzzle, but navigating around and doing things. And it felt incredibly fun and if you want a
and
relaxing game, I'd recommend it.
well, what you're talking about is like one of my favorite sort of aspects of games. You're sort of saying like, what makes a game that is like, what's the word? Like, what makes a game enjoyable for you, right? I think yeah, is a question that we were sort of touching on earlier, and like I love when the aesthetic and the art direction and the mechanics are so intermeshed, right? the way you described, right? To me, that is like my favorite way of seeing games come together, where like there's such a kind of like a connection between, I was just looking at webbed and watching the spider and its pieces and how the animations work, and how that plays into the playfulness of the game, the web mechanic like just fits in with the gameplay so well. And it's a feel thing. It's really hard to you know kind of like quantify. Like I'm really impressed with games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, right? Like it's like technically just incredible what it does, but it also looks uh for lack of a better word, like its realism kind of like is boring. Like it's like absolutely stunning. Or Irish DLC or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. You look out and like the sky, like the weather patterns and like the ocean and like everything is so like 100, like the skies and like the way the ocean and waves moved against like the rock formations. Like this is like no small amount of money was put into like studying and ensuring this stuff was correct, right? And it's beautiful in this like realism kind of way, right? But as soon as we get to like when I compare that to something with like far less you know a game that came out in the last couple of years that I really like is Heaven's Vault, and it has like this amazing like aesthetic that combines kind of like hand drawn illustration and storybook kind of like feeling, but like with like a traditional, when I say traditional, like 80s or 90s like point and click adventure game. And like there's this weird thing where to create all these dynamic things to keep the expressive drawings and stuff in, kind of like not spend all this time making leg animation just to have things walk around. They kind of have people's lower extremities kind of fade into nothing. In fact, it's sort of eerie, but it also sort of like ties into the story as you keep going into like the cyclical nature of the universe that was created there, or like how robots often have feet that you can see, and like aren't fading away that way, but that like actually like plays into the hierarchy of the game story later on. It's really cool when that stuff happens, and that's like not an action game. That's like a narrative game. But like when it in any genre, as soon as you do that, I find that stuff super exciting and enjoyable.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and yeah, I agree. It's one of the things I like about a lot of indie games where thematically, or where they might tie the game to a thematic purpose, and it's different in a fantastic way than being able to look out, like you said, in Assassin's Creed, and oh wow, this looks perfect. It looks like they spent untold amounts of money to make sure everything was as
Hmm.
accurate as possible. But sometimes a game that's heavily tied into the theme of things and everything just is so cohesive, that's just as great, right? It's you don't get bored on a
Yeah,
heavily
it,
themed game.
or like when your brain like fills in the gaps. This is why I was talking about Atari games and retro games. And some of my best memories are still old games, despite like spending much more time in older age on like on more modern games. But like those gaps are so important. They add to for at least for me, they reinforce the memory. They made me work harder to remember some of these adventures, games from when I was a kid that I loved. I was lucky enough to like have an experience across a pretty wide variety of platforms. Like so, like my first computer was like a trash 8, and interestingly enough, that this guy named Ken Kalish, who was published a game through Computerware called Starship Chameleon, and it's like a proto Ikaruga. I played it as a kid. It was like a ship flying around, and there were aliens at the top that were dropping colored bombs, and you would switch between red and yellow, and like you could absorb those bombs, or no, sorry, yellow and green, and then occasionally red smart bombs would fall, and you couldn't block those, you had to avoid those. And like it's not Ikaruga, but it's like similar. It has some of these ideas. but like in my mind, it's how to like everything was. It didn't matter. It felt like the most immersive thing in the world, you know. Um, yeah, I could go on like on the ColecoVision Cabbage Patch Adventures, you know, like it was hilarious to me. Like I was like it was Cabbage Patch Kids, and like, but it didn't matter. They were on this adventure that was way more epic than any side-scrolling adventure. We were a little bit a ways from Super Mario Brothers, but it had like pitfall like screens that you would sort of go through, and just like endless amounts of charm, and what was being thrown at you in terms of environmental hazards and stuff like that. It felt like a real adventure, you know. Thinking of some other games when I was a kid that in the arcade, Legend of Kage, by Taito, was like the badass martial art arcade game. I mean, you could sail through the air, and ninjas would throw ninja stars at you, and you would push your dagger button. You would sweep your arm in a beautiful arc, and it would deflect the ninja star. And like, this was what 80. I want to say 86, 87, something like that. That blew my mind. I was 10 years old and going, what? You could block that shot? It was amazing. And get into like all sorts of like high flying, jumping up into trees that were scrolling 100, felt like 100 screens tall. It was amazing. So like all these things though, like the thing that they have in common, though, the connection between the aesthetics and that gameplay was so tight that you never felt like one thing, like they were just slapping text over the texting request to tell you what was happening. It felt like a storybook, or like an immersive storybook. In Starship Chameleon, it was fast and the mechanic responded to you, so like it felt like you were right there. And Cabbage Patch, same. I talked about the Legend of Kage, and all these things really had that link, that special sort of like sauce where it all just came together.
Yeah, and I've already said I absolutely love games that thematically they can find what they need to do and be cohesive, right? Because that's you're always going to enjoy something that tells a very clear story in the gameplay, the aesthetic, the everything, right? You're not going to be a ninja fighting in New York City, and that'll just feel awkward, right? Very, very blunt example there, but forgive me on that.
I see you have some strong opinions on
Oh, that was unintentionally meant targeted at anything. If it
yeah, no,
was.
I'm teasing you. I know. I just
Okay.
think it's funny. Yeah.
Now, Henry, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I do, as much as I've enjoyed talking with you, I don't want to steal you away for, the entire day. Um, so, if there was anything else that you wanted to discuss, a cool game, what you're doing, or something you feel more people should be aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. As well, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you, which will also include in the episode descriptions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've really enjoyed our conversation. We got to touch on, things that are really near and dear to my heart, things that are I find, actual hardships that the industry is facing, both locally and, across the board. And we got to talk about like, things that make games, great, that, transcend time and technology, and we're talking about some older games and stuff like that. I'll say that two games from 2021 that I think everyone should play. I think should play XO1, which is on Game Pass. I think actually both these games are on Game Pass. XO1 and Full Escape, two very different games, really wonderful kind of stuff. I desperately want to tell you about games that my community are making right now, but I can't, not yet. But maybe there'll be a chance to do a follow up with you or get some of those in the coming year. But really, really, really cool stuff. If you haven't already, also check out Christine Love's Get in the Car Loser. It's a pretty amazing JRPG-esque game that she created, wrote and programmed, and worked with some great artists on. It's free, and the DLC is um, paid and has a spicy swimsuit portion each episode, shall we say? So check it out. Awesome, awesome stuff. But generally, I just want to thank you and for doing what you're doing and keeping discussions going. You can find me on Twitter at Henry Faber. That's HenryFaber. You can find out what's going on with Gamma Space at Gamma Space TO on Twitter and at gammaspace.ca. Wait, we don't have gammaspace.ca, do we? What do I
No,
use?
you do actually.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
Gammaspace.ca is the
Okay.
one I'm looking at
No,
right now,
that's the
actually.
one. I got confused for a moment. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of updates there, but I suspect that you'll see more of that soon. And I also want to plug one other thing for anyone who's listening, and that is my partner and her partner Eileen. So my partner in all things and wife Jenny Robinson Faber, and her partner Eileen Haloka have launched a fund. You can find it at weirdghosts.ca. This fund is pretty exciting. It's basically it's an impact fund for students by underrepresented founders across Canada, and they're giving away serious money to everything from concept to growing to early stage studios. So it's not just about the games, though; it's about what the studio is doing, who's running the structure is ensuring there's healthy and exciting opportunities for um, traditionally underfunded and underrepresented founders to build amazing companies, build amazing studios, so that it's not just a one and done game. So if any of your listeners fall into that category or just interested, check out weirdghost.ca. Something cool that Gamma Space is about to do with them is some of the people in one of their programs will be becoming Gamma Space members and will be mentored through the creation of their initial demo or pitch for studios. And they get paid to do this by Weird Ghost through the fund. And our community supports them and helps them with all of the members that can bring experience on production or anything like that, but also share their progress and have a community to reach out to that isn't necessarily the entire world or something they have to manage on their own Discord or whatever. So yeah, that's what I'd like to part with.
And thank you for the recommendations and sharing that. I'll definitely include that in the episode description. And I think the what you said high level there for what your wife and her partner and through Weird Ghost is trying to do. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I don't mean this in any way negative. I wish the best of luck and success for that, as well as for Gamma Space, obviously, because
Thank you.
I think both of those things that what you work with and that as well are both absolutely fantastic things to try and do and promote. So in as well as for your members as well. I'm from Canada. I'm Canadian. I'm from Ontario. I love to hear and see and know that that the scene is strong, and like you said, it's a little not one scene, but you know what I mean. So it's I hope that everyone that that you work with and everything, I hope for the best for everyone, especially in this pandemic time when it's just trying to do your best and hope the sky's not actually falling.
Agreed. Thank you for all your support, and yeah, stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. And again, Henry, the pleasure was all mine. I'll do my best to make sure those links are in the description. People can find you. Yeah. So, thanks so much.
Thanks. And yeah, take care, Link. Thanks. Really, I really appreciate you doing this kind of stuff. It's great the people you've had on, and it really makes me feel like, there's good people doing stuff.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your very kind words. Yeah, thank you is the best I can really say. And thanks again, Henry, for making time to have this conversation with me. And thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast. And a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Road Steep. And if you like this podcast and want to support it and help it grow, please subscribe or follow me on Twitter at Red Tunic Podcast to receive the latest episodes and news, and be sure to share it with those you think might also enjoy it. Thanks, and until next time.